I want my best games on the best platforms covered by the best announcing teams. Period. End of story.
And welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Announcer Schedules podcast. I'm your host, Mike Gill, along with Phil DeMontmollin, the voice, the handle, behind the handle at Announcer Skeds. And we're back for episode number 109 of the podcast. Don't forget, like, rate, review, and subscribe. We're up over 37,000 followers on the X platform, getting close to 38,000. And we hope you continue to like, rate, review, subscribe, and follow at Announcer Skeds for all of the announcer news, updates, pairings, and more. And Phil, we're getting to the kickoff of the NFL season tonight. We're going to dive into that, the Hall of Fame game, Major League Baseball, and the dog days of summer. But the Olympics have kind of taken over the airwaves here. A lot of great ratings and reviews so far for the Olympics. We'll talk more about some broadcasting and announcing pairings there. But welcome back into episode 109. Here we are on the X platform. And boy, we got a lot happening.
Yeah, great to be with you, Mike. And the Olympics, I'll tell you what, they've consumed my attention and my consciousness more than I thought they would. You know, a couple months ago, I was sort of wondering how successful these Olympic Games are going to be. Didn't feel like there was that much attention, leading into it as far as, the whole calendar year and that kind of thing heading towards these Paris Games. And it's really gotten my attention much, much more than I would have imagined. We've talked about the allure of daytime sports and sports at kind of different hours and in the morning. It's been great to have it on in the background at the office and things like that. But I'm looking forward to diving into it because there's been a lot of developments in terms of the announcers, which ones have shined through these Olympic Games. And yeah, it's been great so far in the early goings of these Paris Olympics.
Yeah, sometimes, you get live stuff on. You don't know if it's live. It's the encore presentation. It is a little confusing because of the time change. But, yeah, I've been watching a lot of the Olympics, more so at night than in the daytime here. But a lot of thoughts on what's happening over at the Olympics. It started off with the opening ceremonies. That seems like it was so long ago. It's weird how sometimes there's events that start before the opening ceremonies and people are like, wait, the Olympics started? I never saw the opening ceremonies. Well, the opening ceremonies have come and gone, and it was an interesting mashup of personalities.
Yeah, and you're right. There were some events those first couple of days, day -2 and day -1, heading into the opening ceremonies, things like rugby and soccer. And part of that is, from a facility standpoint, they need to get the track and field stadium cleared out and ready to go for the big track and field events. So rugby also plays there. So they were getting that going early. But then the opening ceremony came, huge production for NBC and all the partners involved with that. The River Seine and the athletes coming on boats rather than just walking into the stadium traditionally provided a whole different look and feel to the thing. Way more of an entertainment type program than I remember, at least. There was all sorts of celebrities and just sort of kind of cute little pieces that I think kind of go to a different demographic, not necessarily the hardcore sports fan. But yeah, Tirico leading the charge there, but he had alongside him Kelly Clarkson and Peyton Manning. So interesting pairing there. Maria Taylor was embedded on the Team USA boat, and then Snoop Dogg making appearances. We've seen him
He's been
everywhere. We'll talk about him, I'm sure, even more. But yeah, it was one of those, like, I'm glad I checked it out for a little bit, but then I ended up watching longer than I wanted to. And that feeling afterwards, Mike, when you're like, I'll never have these 2 hours back again in my life. It was sort of one of those.
Well, I certainly heard the it was very well a lot of viewership. I heard both sides of the coin, and unfortunately, that's the landscape of the world we live in today. It's either you really liked it or you hated it. It doesn't seem like there was anything in the middle here. I thought the Peyton Manning, Kelly Clarkson pairing was a little odd. It was almost as if they had never met before. Like, it was a little bit of a weird pairing there. It almost like they gave them no bullet points. Like I do the radio show, and a lot of times they'll say, hey, can you talk about this? And you're kind of talking about like a promotion that you don't know a lot. You'll say, hey, can I get some bullet points just so I have something? It was like they put them out there with no bullet points and just were like, wing it. And you mentioned they were on the boat, so I think that made it more difficult. They probably couldn't do like a trial run of this, like a high school graduation. You get like one chance to at least practice it, and then you kind of know what you're doing. It didn't seem that they had any trial run here. So I thought it was a little clunky for a little bit there with the Peyton Manning, Mike Tirico, Kelly Clarkson kind of collaboration, if you will, there.
Yeah, and it was pouring down rain, so there's that to deal with. That doesn't help at all. And I kind of feel for the NBC production folks because they were really looking forward to blowing this thing out of the water from a visual standpoint. And I know they had to do away with some of their cameras and some of the really tricked out stuff because of the rain and some of their aerial views and that kind of thing. As much as anything, it's a showcase of the the host city and in Paris and that kind of thing. But yeah, I understand it's a different type of program. People have equated it to, like the Macy's Thanksgiving parade and that kind of thing. I get it. But yeah, Kelly Clarkson, it didn't seem like she got the typical prep that you would see in that us sports broadcasters are used to. But hey, it's come and gone. We probably are the only ones still talking about the opening ceremony. So yeah, let's keep on moving on here, Mike.
All right. So the opening ceremony kicked it all off, and now we have some notable Olympic announcer pairings that we've got for the 2024 games. Basketball, gymnastics, rugby, skateboarding, women's soccer, the swimming, all of those high-profile, starts of the week. The swimming and gymnastics are getting kind of the highlights of the later night. Of course, the basketball has some noticeable names. But I'll give you just a quick, the swimming. My girlfriend's a swimmer. Her boys swim. And I've watched a lot of swimming. But you watch the swimming, the gymnastics, all of these, like, Olympic sports. I'll tell you, the analysts always seem to do such a great job. They are so well-versed in these events and some of the energy they bring. It is a reason why you kind of get, even if you're like, I'm watching gymnastics, I have no interest, but they just explain and tell you the analysts for these Olympic sports are always so good. They're so into it. They're so energetic. I give them a lot of credit for sports that are probably pretty difficult to be an analyst for.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Mike, because it's really kind of interesting when you think about these announcer pairings for the Olympics, because typically it's a traditional play-by-play announcer for any given sport, even the super obscure sports, who we see these guys on baseball, football, basketball, all these things. So they're using their trade as a play-by-play announcer and their preparation, in the nuts and bolts of just solid play-by-play. But then you couple them with a expert in that particular sport, someone who's just totally zeroed in on that sport. But then moreover, they've got that connection to the Olympics themselves and to Team USA and that kind of thing. And so you've got this just in incredible combination of the quality play-by-play and the prep and all that. And then that energy, that passion that you're talking about, but also that expertise, guys like Tim Daggett on gymnastics, Lori Hernandez on women's gymnastics. And then, no better example than Rowdy Gaines over on the swimming side.
Yeah, there's a lot of, and I was listening to, I guess, oh man, I can't remember, the name just escaped me. I was listening to a podcast with her, and just the energy they bring for some of these events. They're just so into it. They're so excited for these athletes, and it kind of does make it that feel of what was the Olympics were supposed to be about, the amateurism, and these people who dedicate their lives for 4 years to get ready for this one event that gets brought through the television screen a lot of times by these color analyst. So they do a really good job. The play-by-play is not an easy job because, quite frankly, let's be honest, you're not calling a swimming event or a skateboarding event. How about the guy who's out doing the surfing? I mean, he's out in Tahiti doing the surfing out
What
there.
an assignment. Wow.
What an assignment is right. The basketball has been highlighted by Noah Eagle and Dwayne Wade. Interested to get your thoughts on that pairing. I got a text message last night from a friend of mine, was not a fan of the pairing. I've heard a lot about Dwayne Wade kind of having like a nervous laugh a lot and just kind of the interaction between those two being a little clunky. I like Noah Eagle on the play-by-play. I have to agree. Wade, I'm still trying to feel my way through here a little bit.
Well, I think it's worth noting how little relative experience Wade has in roles like this. You know, he did some studio work with TNT, and you would see him, you know, for a few years on like kind of that secondary inside the NBA, that other night that it wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't necessarily, you know, Charles and company and that kind of thing. But to my knowledge, he hasn't done too many live games in the game reps. And so, you know, it's a little bit unfair to him, to be honest, for NBC to just kind of throw him into the Olympic Games and something so high profile. That's kind of like, you know, we've seen that happen to other announcers where, you know, the traditional way to develop an announcer is to get them reps and get them experience on lesser programs and get them going and then bring them into the big time. You know, remember they threw Drew Brees into it, you know, right from the get-go and things like that. So, you know, to Wade's defense, I don't think he's had that many reps calling live game action. And so he's learning on the fly in a lot of ways. He seems to have a great willingness to learn. You know, everybody seemed to point to when he pointed out that he was calling Team USA we or us, you know, that first person pronoun, which is like broadcasting 101, you know, you don't want to, you know, say that over the air and that kind of thing. So he caught himself doing that and over the air said, hey, Noah, correct me on this. There was another video going around showing Noah and D Wade practicing pronunciations of the Serbian team, which isn't an easy assignment and that kind of thing. So he, I think, is putting in the effort. But I think it's a wait and see kind of thing to see how much he grows as an analyst alongside Noah Eagle. A big opportunity for him because people are talking about him as potentially an A-team analyst with the new NBA deal, whether it's with NBC and Mike Tirico, or perhaps even, you know, if he were to have some free agency, you know, over on ESPN or Amazon or that kind of thing. So kind of interesting. But I agree with you, Mike. It's been kind of, I think it's more of a mixed bag than people think. You know, a lot of people have really praised this team of Noah Eagle and D Wade. But I've also heard some people, you know, kind of criticize Wade in particular, just like you.
Yeah, well, and I will say, I think this is, you know, more like inside baseball kind of conversation where, you know, a buddy of mine said they couldn't just find somebody else to do it and like they can't bring it. I'm like, well, no, you're contractually obligated to the network you work with. You can't just go grab, you know, Reggie Miller and say, hey, can you come do the Olympics? He's got a contract with Turner. And this is going to go to the NBC NBA rights. What's going to happen with all the TNT people? Where are they going to end up going? Amazon Prime is going to need people. But I told him, I said, NBC doesn't do NBA basketball. They don't have NBA broadcasters at their disposal. So they had to kind of throw this pairing together. So it takes a little time to get the chemistry together there. Plus, as you said, Wade has very little game experience. NBC just doesn't have people on their roster to do basketball, right? So, and he's like, I couldn't get a freelancer. Like, you know, just like a lot of people not understanding how that works. So, I mean, we talked a little bit about it, but if you're under contract, you can't just go work for the Olympics because ESPN's just not going to say, hey, you know what? Go ahead and do the Olympics for this week for NBC.
Yeah. I think the other thing worth noting is, you know, why D Wade for this particular assignment. And you got to remember he played on Team USA. It was a key part to some of those teams and, you know, intimately aware of the going-ons on that Team USA squad, buddies with a lot of the players, and is able to share his personal accounts on what it was like to be a member of that team. Not to mention, he knows the coaches. Eric Spoelstra is on that coaching staff, his coach for the Miami Heat all those years. So he makes a lot of sense, just on paper as a former athlete, just like we're talking about these other sports, getting these analysts on board for their particular sport. I think, I would have liked to see him somehow get some experience. Maybe they could have used him over on USA Network last season during college hoop season or something to get him prepared and that kind of thing. But we'll see. I think there's a lot of upside because he is there's a really personable side to D Wade. He'd be a great guy to just chill and talk hoops with, right?
Well, I'll ask you that though. Is that better suited for studio work or game analysts? Where I think one of the problems with the game analyst being that guy is he kind of has that nervous laugh. You said the we and the I and all that kind of stuff. Is that better suited for being a studio guy or the guy giving you the X's and O's and the insight on the game?
Yeah, maybe so. But that being said, I think it's a wait and see thing. Let's see if he develops into that game analyst as well, because he certainly knows the X's and O's, and you hear him from time to time drop some of that in. But I think if they continue to work together, I'm sure he's got a great partner there in Noah Eagle, who despite his age is one of the top guys across the landscape in terms of play-by-play. And so if he continues to work closely with Noah, work with the producers, that kind of thing, I can see Wade improving dramatically. And it's worth watching even within this Olympics. Hey, how was Wade's performance in games 1 and 2 versus the end of the tournament? And how does he improve throughout the tournament? And in those games at the end of the tournament, frankly, are going to be the ones that are going to be the biggest and with the highest stakes. So hopefully they'll continue to improve throughout this deal. And I still am bullish on this pairing, but I just wish he would have gotten a chance to get some more experience heading into this deal.
All right. And you mentioned, the gymnastics is going on. A lot of that's kind of wrapping up. It's funny. Week 1 comes and goes pretty quickly, and then you roll into the track and field stuff will be next week. The women's soccer, the swimming is kind of wrapping up. We saw Katie Ledecky, 8 gold medals. Michael Phelps has kind of been all over the place. By the way, Missy Franklin was the name I was thinking of. She's covering it for Yahoo. She's doing some work for them. She's very excitable to listen to, though, the passion about the swimmers. Katie Ledecky, who is, they showed the video the other night. They had to go with like an all 22 camera to show how far away the closer, I guess you could say, the 1,500 meters, she just wiped the field out. So there's been a lot of good stories. But that's my takeaway from the announcers. All the play-by-play, like for instance, Kenny Albert's doing water polo. I mean, that's just like you're hearing Kenny Albert do water polo. Sorry, I have the Jersey accent. Water polo. To hear him doing that is kind of funny. I was watching a little bit of that last night with France and Egypt, was it? I think France scored a goal as time expired and the place went bonkers.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the perfect example. It's where you really see these play-by-play guys shine in a lot of ways. Kenny Albert, who we all know from, hockey and football and basketball and baseball and all these things, all these, what they call in racing ball and stick sports that we're used to. Well, here we go. Water polo of all sports. I mean, how often are you paying attention to water polo? And Albert's able to ramp up, study the sport, and be able to provide that layman's viewpoint at a lot of times and do a lot of education to the viewer who's never watched the sport either. That's the one thing you got to be careful of sometimes with some of these events is talking over the heads of all your viewers. So a lot of it is, educational and teaching them about a particular sport and some of the nuances and some of the rules and that kind of thing. And Albert has done a fantastic job all remotely, by the way. So he's one of those crews doing it from the Stamford, Connecticut studios. Also, Chris Lewis, worth mentioning as well. Another name who comes up quite a bit, an up-and-coming play-by-player. He's been doing the same kind of thing with table tennis. And do want to give a shout-out to Todd Harris, was able to catch some of him on skateboard. And he's one of these versatile play-by-play announcers. I used to work with Todd a little bit back in his ESPN days doing college football, but he's been doing skateboarding and, able to just sort of, hey, here's your assignment, whether it's skateboarding or in the wintertime. Todd does a lot of, these sort of extreme, X game type sports and that kind of thing. I mean, heck, how much do you pay attention to these things, on a day in, day out basis, but then you're able to get yourself educated on it and then provide it to the viewers in a digestible way. So shout out to these guys.
And you're focusing on the American teams a lot, but when there's that guy or girl from another country that you have to know kind of like that they're a contender or somebody that maybe comes out of nowhere, to have the depth to be able to kind of speak on their behalf, I guess that's got to be the most difficult thing. Like, last night I was watching some of the gymnastics and there was a guy from, I think it was Turkey or maybe Ukraine. And you're thinking, like, where do you get the information on it? Like, where have you seen this guy perform before? Like, that you have this background of all the information and the depth. I'm sure they give him just a ton of background information that you got to do a lot of preparation for. But hey, the announcing field shines during these Olympic Games, just like the athletes do. Remember that. And one of the things that's been shining is the Peacock Gold Zone. That's been getting high praise. Plus some appearances from Bob Costas and Al Michaels, who were in Paris for the NBC games.
Yeah, so you mentioned the Gold Zone. We can touch on that first. This sort of Sunday ticket style, whip around show where they have multiple boxes on the screen and that kind of thing. It's been getting some absolutely high praise. A great way to watch the Olympic Games. You have to have Peacock, to check that out. But what's interesting is who's hosting this deal. Scott Hansen and Andrew Siciliano. NFL fans know those two for certain. And you got to see those two on camera for the first time in history together because they used to be on different channels and that kind of thing. So that was kind of a cool twist. Also, Jock Collinsworth and Matt Eisman getting some reps there. They're doing sort of the earlier morning stuff, I believe. And then you mentioned Bob Costas and Al Michaels. How about this development suddenly in Paris? Costas and Michaels have turned up in Paris. NBC has brought both of them on, which is kind of interesting because both, have, left the network in different ways. Costas left a few years ago, works now for, TBS and for MLB Network and that kind of thing. Michaels left for Amazon. And then if you remember, he was signed to that emeritus role, but then he was suddenly kind of kicked to the curb a little bit when it came to that NBC playoff game for Noah Eagle, of all people, and Todd Blackledge, that team. And so there was sort of that, and Michaels he found out via a press report and that kind of thing. So, they didn't even have the proper conversation with him. Well, anyway, it all seems to be water under the bridge because Michaels and Costas are in Paris. Now, the report from Front Office Sports was that they were going to make some surprise on-air appearances. So they'll pop in during the coverage. I don't know if they've popped in yet on the actual coverage with Tirico and company. That being said, whatever the initial surprise was, the cat was out of the bag yesterday because at the beach volleyball courts in the shadows of the Eiffel Tower, a selfie was taken between Bob Costas, Al Michaels, and Snoop Dogg, the three of them in one photo outside the Eiffel Tower at the beach volleyball game. Michaels, by the way, turns 80 this November. Costas, 72 years old, and Snoop Dogg, timeless in many ways. And the three of them hanging out at beach volleyball, of all things.
That's quite a venue.
Yeah, we'll go from there.
That's
what a venue.
The picture of that venue. And I was at the Eiffel Tower like 2 summers ago. So I can got a picture of that. It's fresh in my mind of seeing like where that's situated and how neat that would be. I wonder how many One thing about Paris, from what I recall, is the amount of people outside trying to sell you the miniature Eiffel Tower things. Those people have to be all over the place this week trying to make some big sales. That was one thing about Paris I vividly remember, was the amount of people that are out there trying to sell the little replica of the Eiffel Tower. They're literally everywhere. So I would imagine that's pretty busy this week. All right, let's get to the National Football League. The Hall of Fame game kicks off tonight, and ESPN ABC has the game, and they're going all out.
Yeah, Houston versus Chicago, of course, in Canton, Ohio, the home of the Hall of Fame game. And yeah, we've seen this game on other networks, especially NBC, for quite a few years leading up to this one. But it's the property of ESPN and ABC now. So we're going to see that A team, Joe Buck, Troy Aikman, Lisa Salters. So we'll see them in action. Plus, Laura Rutledge will be part of the broadcast team. What she'll be doing throughout tonight's broadcast is interviewing the Hall of Fame enshrinees throughout the show. And here we are. And this kind of snuck up on me in a lot of ways. But Texans Bears Hall of Fame game tonight. You think you'll be tuned in at all, Mike?
I might. I mean, I usually, by the way, one of the reasons I might tune in, Jason Kelsey, I guess, is going to make his debut tonight on the desk with Scott Van Pelt, Ryan Clark, Marcus Spears, Adam Schefter. So they're also going to have their Monday night countdown crew. So check out how Kelsey kind of is integrated into that. I know a lot of people here locally, Kelsey's just everywhere. I mean, he is everywhere. Anywhere he moves, there's a report. He was on the beach. He's in Sea Isle. He's in Stone Harbor. He's at this place. He had pancakes at this joint. He went to Eagles practice. It's just unbelievable that he has time to actually do this game tonight. But he was arm wrestling an Olympian the other day. So Kelsey will make his debut tonight. So I'll check out that. Yeah, I'll probably put the game on just to get a little football feel, but probably won't be tuned in for too long.
Yeah, that's the case with preseason, right? If you're watching in the third or fourth quarter of a preseason game and you don't have money on it, I question your sanity a little bit. But I guess some people,
popping of the pads, man. It's just the popping of the pads.
Popping of the pads. Yep. But Westwood One coverage as well, Mike. So great to see them kicking off their schedule. Also, yes. Scott Graham and James Lofton. We talked about Lofton, no longer part of that CBS national television crew, but great to see him still working for Westwood One here. I love James Lofton. I love Scott Graham for that matter. And it'll be great to hear those two on Westwood One and get their season going.
Yep, and radio programmers out there, Westwood One is offering that game. If you want to pop on a little football on your radio tonight, our station will be carrying it here in Atlantic City, just like driving around the car. Here locally, we have a place called Wawa, which is like a little convenience store, kind of like a mini market. So if you have to go get the milk or some bread at night, you put the game on in the car and you hear just a little football while you're driving around with Scott Graham and James Lofton on the call tonight. What about ESPN? They're going to be covering the enshrinement of 7 NFL players going to Canton.
Yeah, so the enshrinement ceremony takes place Saturday. So, a couple days after tonight's game, and starting at 12 p.m., Kevin Agandi, Lewis Riddick anchoring the coverage there. They've got a whole team of reporters also. And interesting class includes Dwight Freeney, Steve McMichael, who's been battling some serious health conditions, for the former Chicago Bear, Jared Payton, Walter Payton's son, who's done his share of media work throughout his career, a former Miami Hurricane who, I once got to know back when he was a college student athlete. He'll be accepting on behalf of Steve McMichael. And then speaking of the Miami Hurricanes, two more of my all-time favorites on the field, Mike, Devin Hester and Andre Johnson being enshrined as well. Also worth noting, ESPN has got their team of reporters who are, all over the place. And the one notable one, remember, we talked a few shows back about Ed Werder leaving ESPN. His old spot goes to a guy, Todd Archer, who's been part of the ESPN mix for a few years now, but has been a great beat reporter over the years, knows that Dallas market, but big shoes to fill coming in for Ed Werder there. But for those wondering who's going to be given those Cowboys reports, it's going to be Todd Archer. Then there's that army of reporters from around the NFL, and we'll start to see them beginning this weekend as well.
Interesting couple assignments. Jeremy Fowler, a lot of times, is in that New England area. I guess with the Patriots kind of knocked down about 5 pegs this year, Fowler is not on the Patriots. He's on Denver. Dan Graziano, very noticeable in generally the NFC East region with the Eagles and the Giants. The Eagles are, of course, Sal Paolantonio. Dan Graziano with the Giants not having a lot of stories. He's out in Cleveland there, so that's an interesting change for Dan. You usually see him in the NFC East. Kimberly A. Martin, she's with the Jets. Sal Paolantonio, as always, with the Eagles. And by the way, people who watch this show, if you like Sal Pal, every Friday at 3:00, he is on the radio with me. We talk Eagles with Sal Pal. And we got to get Sal Pal on the show here. He has told me that he will come on as a guest at some point. We just got to get our schedules together. But you've worked with Sal.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'd love to have him on the show, Mike, because we both have gotten to know him, you much better than me from different perspectives. I got to work with him one game in Pittsburgh as his statistician, and I had an absolute blast working alongside Sal. But great to see him in this role. It's one of those comfort things, right? Once you see Sal Pal come on to the screen and that he's reporting, from Eagles camp or from wherever, NFL is back.
Yes. So the venerable Sal Pal in Philly, Brooke Pryor with Pittsburgh, and Eric Woodyard with the Lions. So the Lions now getting a little higher profile this year. Jamison Hensley, venerable name. You hear him with the Ravens all the time. Courtney Cronin, she's with the Bears. Rob Domofsky with the Packers. So that is the stable of reporters with NFL Live to start things off. What about the new on-air rules analyst?
Yeah, so this was the old spot of John Perry's, and ESPN and John Perry parted ways as far as the rules analyst for ESPN and ABC and Monday Night Football as we get going. Well, it's going to be Russell Yerk, a name I wasn't too familiar with, former NFL officiating executive, 15 years of experience with the NFL. To my knowledge, I've never seen his name come across.
Perry, by the way, real quick, John Perry left to go work with the Bills.
Oh, that's right. Yep.
A rules liaison with the Bills. So he left to go work with an NFL team.
Gotcha. So that's where you'll find Perry. But we'll see how York does. A tougher job than I think a lot of people realize as far as this rules analyst and being able to get in and out effectively.
And by the way, we've had a couple of rules analysts on the Announcer Schedules podcast to kind of give us some background on how that job Dean Blandito was on this year. We had him on at the Super Bowl, and he, gives us a little bit of insight on what a Sunday is like for these guys who are the rules analysts, which, I did get mixed reviews. Some people like them. Some people think they always agree with the on-field guys. I mean, it's a mixed bag when you look at the rules analysts. But I think when done right, they can offer something to the broadcast.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's especially.
By the way, was also on with us 2 years ago.
Yeah, and Sterator, obviously one of the absolute best in the business. Mike Pereira, a long-time rules analyst as well. Yeah, I mean, I think it's become something people expect on the big games, that's for sure. And best of luck to Russell Yerk as he goes into this new role here for him, Monday Night Football on-air rules analyst.
All right, getting down to the end of the podcast, but let's get into the dog days of summer. MLB this weekend has got the Apple TV Plus on the Friday nights. Saturday we'll have radio and some Fox coverage, regional coverage for Fox TV. So they're starting to get into their summer season. Sunday with a Roku, Sunday Night Baseball, and of course ESPN Radio. So there's a lot happening with MLB.
Yeah, so Apple TV Plus game. Still waiting for who's where there necessarily, but that'll be Royals, Tigers, and Brewers Nationals on Friday night. And then Saturday, 3 Fox regional games. Baltimore at Cleveland. That'll once again be Adam Amin and John Smoltz along with Ken Rosenthal. Joe Davis will be with the Dodgers this weekend. Rays, Astros, another former guest of the podcast, Kevin Kugler, alongside Eric Karros. And then Giants, Reds will be Jason Benetti and Mark Sweeney. There's also Sunday games. You mentioned Roku, Giants, Reds, where they combine the announcers. John Sadak, the Reds play-by-play announcer, very, very popular voice for the Reds. He'll be calling play-by-play alongside Giants analyst Javier Lopez. And then you got the Cardinals-Cubs series this weekend at Wrigley. ESPN Radio will have coverage both Saturday and Sunday. Carl Ravitch and Doug Glanville on Saturday. Sunday, Boog Shambi and Doug Glanville, a home game for Boog. And then Sunday Night Baseball, naturally Cardinals Cubs as well. Ravitch, who will be doing Saturday radio, he'll be in his usual TV spot on Sunday night alongside Ed Perez and David Cohn. And then the StatCast will be back. This has been getting some good reviews, Mike. I need to check it out a little further. Kevin Brown, the play-by-play announcer over on ESPN2, sort of, leading the charge there for that StatCast broadcast alongside Mike Petrello and Trevor May. So a bunch of baseball. And then one final note, check this out, Mike. On Tuesday of next week, so Tuesday, August 6th, there's a Brewers-Braves game on TBS, and who's scheduled to do that is Bob Costas. He's on the books for Brewers Braves alongside Ron Darling, which makes you think he's going to have to hustle back to from Paris at some point. If he's hanging out with Snoop Dogg and Al Michaels bouncing around Paris, somehow, some way, he's got to get to Atlanta by Tuesday night to call this game with Ron Darling. So that'll give you, I guess, a little indication of when we'll see Costas, I guess just over these next few days, or maybe he'll head back out there after the baseball game, or, maybe there'll be a last minute replacement for him. Who knows? But I did want to mention he's scheduled to do Tuesday's baseball game for TBS. So we'll see how that all shakes out.
All right. Good stuff there. The MLB season into August now. So 2 months away from the start of October baseball. A couple quick nuggets here. The return of Good Morning Football this week. Did you catch Michael Buffer reintroducing the show as they relaunched this week? They moved. We talked about this on a couple podcasts back. They shut the show down. They moved it from New York to L.A., and some of the cast members stayed. Most of them did. Jamie Erdahl, Kyle Brandt, and Peter Schrager stayed with the show, and they moved it out to L.A. They relaunched it this week. So it's the relaunch of Good Morning Football was this week. I don't know how many people remember that they went off, and now they're back for the football season. That was the story we talked about back at the beginning of the summertime, I guess. They put that show on hiatus.
Yeah, that's right. And, they've moved the show to Los Angeles and, some different personnel and that kind of thing. Worth mentioning, you mentioned Jamie Erdahl, and I did catch a little bit of the show a day or two ago. But, you saw the news that the NFL is now going to have this in-game requirement for coaches to do interviews, sort of like what we see in the NBA. Something I think is ridiculous. I really do. And I think it's going to take away from a lot of the reports we get from the sidelines
for this. That's what I like. Like, which fans are saying, I need this?
I don't think any fans are. In fact, I saw a poll. I forget who put out this poll on Twitter, but it was overwhelming from the public saying they don't want to see this. And meanwhile, the NFL is mandating this. Some of it might be, remember the whole Carissa Thompson deal as far as, bad information going around and that sort of thing, that the NFL wants to, take control of all this and do away with the conversations by the sideline reporter with the coach off the record and all that kind of thing. Just kind of a weird deal. But anyway, Jamie Erdahl chimed in on it. And, she kind of went on this whole rant about sideline reporters and said, we talked about using we and us and how Dwayne Wade called himself out on that one. Another sort of cardinal sin for announcers is when you're interviewing someone to say, tell me about such and such. Hey, tell me about that touchdown you scored earlier today, or tell me about what it was like to be in the trenches for this matchup. She doesn't like that. You've heard that from a lot of broadcast professionals, but she is not a fan of sideline reporters saying tell me about, and you can find that clip online as well. But weird deal, man. And I don't even like the interviews before kickoff and that kind of thing. I think it's sacred, what these coaches and athletes are doing on their playing field. And, I think it's just sort of added clutter to have these extra interviews and that kind of thing. So we'll see how it pans out. And I'm sure a lot of the coaches aren't going to be too happy to suddenly step away and have to do this interview per league mandate.
Yeah, and also, real quick, it'll be interesting to see, speaking of coaches not wanting to do interviews, Bill Belichick got another job. He's going to be doing a football show for Underdog Fantasy. I'd like to hear Bill Belichick talking fantasy football.
This guy's suddenly everywhere, huh? Yeah. Someone who couldn't stand doing interviews is absolutely everywhere. He's becoming a media giant.
Big time, yeah. So he gets another job there. He's got as many appearances now as Snoop Dogg does at the Olympics. Paul Feinbaum is re-upped at ESPN for college football. Remember when he signed with ESPN? That was like a big deal that he was kind of like going to the mainstream side here, and he has now become one of their top college football voices. So college football almost back. The NFL back tonight. As we're recording this on this Thursday. Don't forget, like, rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast here at Last Word on Sports. And, of course, next week we'll check our schedule. We may be going live for the live viewers a little earlier next week, maybe Wednesday. The audio version of the podcast, of course, you can get on all podcasting platforms. So if you're an audio viewer or listener, I should say, you'll get that on all podcasting platforms like normal. The live viewers, we will be back Wednesday is what we're shooting for next week. I will be out of town for about 10 days, so we'll try to get that all up to you. But there we go. This is episode 109 of the Announcer Schedules podcast. Don't forget, follow at Announcer Skeds on the X platform for all the latest pairings and updates and announcers news. And, of course, you can check us out right here on Last Word on Sports. For Phil, Mike, this has been episode 109 of the Announcer Schedules podcast. Have a great rest of your week, everybody.